All right, let's move on to the San Francisco 49ers. Big stories this offseason. Brandon Ayuk, is he going to be in San Francisco? Is he going to be traded? As of record time, he's a 49er. I don't know if he's locked up or not, but he's on the 49ers while we're talking right now. Whether he's there or not, they're still loaded. They're absolutely loaded. I think there are some places where they're a little more depleted than they were a year ago, but the Niners, a team that has a plethora of playmakers. Kyle Shanahan calling the plays, the best left tackle in football in Trent Williams. Brock Purdy, who, of course, is, he's a hot button issue. Where do the stats come from? Is it Kyle? Is it the playmakers? Well, Purdy has some slice of the pie, as you like to break it out. And he's heading into year 3, right? So there's a chance Purdy actually takes his game to a new level here for the Niners. And then defensively, still a ton of talent. I think the defensive line took a hit from a depth perspective. Eric Armstead, some injuries. Armstead off to Jacksonville, some other injuries and turnover there. But high level, what are you looking for here this year for the Niners?
Yeah, I mean, the 49ers should be looking to win a championship, right? That they've been at that level for a couple of years now. They haven't quite got there. Kansas City obviously beat them. They're looking to win one, and they have the talent to get it done. Like, okay, it's funny. The things like the Brandon Ayuk trade or no trade, it used to be, in-depth reports, player or people speaking on or off the record, all these kinds of things. Now it's, is he following them on Instagram again? That's our biggest question.
Very serious.
Brandon Ayuk has been spotted wearing 49ers merchandise. That's a critical thing. Obviously, he would debrand if he was planning on being traded somewhere else. He would be wearing neutral colors, no 49ers logos. But if he's in 49ers branded merch, he's leaning towards staying. That's where we are with this reporting world.
As a former minor league baseball player, we were not allowed to wear branded gear outside of the stadium. It was a finable offense. You did not tell the public that you played for the San Francisco Giants or the Seattle Mariners. You did not do that. That was frowned upon and a finable offense unless you were going to the gym with the team. That's what we did during the season.
Even the minor league stuff?
Yes. You do not flaunt your professional status as a baseball player. Just throwing that out there that, the football players are different. They're like, look, I play for the Niners. They do it differently. Just saying, as baseball players, always debranded, always, looked professional outside of the stadium.
Well, players, staff, everybody connected with an NFL organization. Like, part of the perk is you just have an endless wardrobe now of free crap, right?
Oh yeah, I get it.
I mean, our former colleague, our friend Bobby Slowick, we met him for breakfast in Cincinnati when the Texans were in town. He's just head to toe in Houston swag, right?
That would have been a fine.
Get a job
That's a
there.
Fine if he's a baseball player.
You get a job there, and somebody just goes, pick anything from this room. That's your wardrobe now. So yeah, of course you take advantage of that. Anyway, so theoretically, Brandon Ayuk is still there. And if Brandon Ayuk is still there, that does give the 49ers the best, the most diverse and formidable group of playmakers, I guess, top to bottom, right? Whether it's running back Christian McCaffrey, tight end George Kittle, wide receiver Brandon Ayuk, weapon X Deebo Samuel, guy without position, Kyle Juszczyk, fullback. Like, they just have playmakers everywhere, and that's not even factoring in first round pick, Ricky Pearsall, the wide receiver that presumably is some kind of Ayuk insurance. Jacob Cowing, mid-round wide receiver that was a star in preseason games. Like, they are so loaded with these guys that can make plays and cause problems. And Brock Purdy has already shown that he can distribute the ball around, that he can make plays when things break down and add some value to the Shanahan offense. The Shanahan offense itself is arguably the biggest cheat code in the NFL scheme-wise. Theoretically, we assume they're going to get Trent Williams back at some point. Again, he's at time of recording, he's unhappy, but is not, I don't think, thought to be a risk for the season. It's not going to, he's going to get there at some point. And that's the best offensive lineman in the NFL. So this group has already shown its championship caliber. Maybe the offensive line as a whole is a little bit of a concern, but the Shanahan offense has always hidden that well. Everybody else is able to overcome that. This still should be one of the best offenses and one of the best teams in the NFL.
Yeah, the offensive line had the ninth worst pass blocking grade by PFF grade last year. And so that's why I want to give Brock Purdy some credit here. I want to add what might be a scary thought here for Niners opponents. I think Brock Purdy's getting better. I think there's room to improve. And I also think he deserves a ton of credit leading up to this. Not all the credit. I don't think he's a 115 passer rating guy or whatever he ended up with last year. I think it was lower. I don't think he's that. I don't think he's going to average 9 yards per attempt for the rest of his career in perpetuity. But Purdy has run that offense extremely well. He had an 87.4 PFF grade last year. Remember, we used to always give Shanahan the credit for taking a 78 grade from Garoppolo and spinning that into a top 5 offense. That's the magic of Shanahan. But Purdy is playing as well as any Shanahan quarterback since the 2016 Matt Ryan MVP caliber season, right? Matt Ryan was already a good quarterback, he gets Shanahan, they've got playmakers, and then boom, it's like one of the best offenses of all time. That's the magic. I think Purdy has a chance to continue to improve, right? He's got some improvisational skills outside of structure. He doesn't have the best arm in the world, but this is the time of the career where if you just add like a few extra RPMs, a little bit more to the arm, he might have a little bit more in the tank. And he did play better in the second half of the season last year, Purdy, even though he's a little up and down on the playoff run. So I think there's actually room to improve for Brock Purdy, in addition to, hey, by the way, good luck covering Deebo Samuel. Brandon Ayuk was playing like a top 5 receiver last year. That was another new wrinkle that they added last year. By the way, Ayuk's just going to play like a top 5 wide receiver. But Deebo and his hybrid ability, Kittle, one of the top 2 tight ends in the NFL still, and Christian McCaffrey, the clear top running back, I think, as far as an all-around threat goes. So you have all those pieces, and I think Purdy is incrementally improving his game, and there's a chance that he takes another step this year, despite some of the preseason stuff. He's thrown too many picks, and he's maybe taking some chances in ways that he wouldn't, but I think he's ready to take another step and maybe make the Shanahan offense all the more dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, it's the most versatile offense in the NFL in terms of the number of guys you have to worry about. Nobody else can boast that array of weapons and that many ways to cause you problems, and that's an issue.
On the defensive side of the ball, I mentioned Eric Armstead being out. Drake Jackson's out for the season on the edge. You still have an elite Nick Bosa. I'm a little more concerned about the defensive line than I have been in previous years. Remember last year, the Niners looked loaded, and then, oh, by the way, we're going to bring in, Randy Gregory and Chase Young. And, even though they didn't all necessarily dominate or anything, they were just so deep on the line. And Chase Young was a good, solid player down the stretch. He wasn't great. But I worry about the depth here on the defensive line compared to previous seasons where it's like, hey, you have 8 dudes who can get after the quarterback. Is it just Nick Bosa and Javon Hargrave at this point? And now you're relying on, Leonard Floyd to be the other edge opposite Nick Bosa. He's okay. He's never been a dominant pass rusher. Is that going to be an issue here for the Niners? Because it looks like the thinnest defensive line I think that they've had in a few years.
I mean, it's so top heavy, right? Like Nick Bosa is a defensive player of the year candidate in any given season. Javon Hargrave is one of the best interior pass rushers in all of football. Run defense isn't as good anymore, but his pass rush is consistent and formidable. And then, Leonard Floyd, I think, is a solid player, but isn't really moving the needle compared with those other two. And anybody else is like a bonus if they do anything. I mean, new guys like Yetur Gross-Matos, Jordan Elliott, Malik Collins, these are sort of underachieving guys that have talent. Like that, it's really just relying on those stars. If Nick Bosa doesn't fire on all cylinders for whatever reason, then suddenly this defensive front is not great. But both him and Hargrave have been consistently really good for them. So as long as they have those two, it's enough, I think, to still be a real impact area for this defense.
That's the key position group for me, man, is the defensive line. And some of those guys you mentioned, Jordan Elliott, who looked like a really productive player as a 3rd-round pick coming out of Missouri, never really found it with the Browns. I mean, it's just trying to find, I think, some compliments up front to Bosa and Hargrave rushing the passer. But you're still talking about a defense. I keep joking about how the Niners have a top 5 player at so many different positions. You get the best linebacker in the NFL in Fred Warner. Dre Greenlaw is fantastic once he's back from injury. Travarius Ward has become one of the better corners in the NFL. And it feels like with some of their offseason additions and the way Ward has played the last couple of years, that they're trying to play a little bit more man coverage. Renardo Green, their second round pick, excels in press man. They've got potential on the back end. There's a lot of safety versatility there with Hufanga being healthy, and Jair Brown last year showed some flashes. So I think my questions on the defensive line are going to be made up for with the way the secondary has come together for the Niners. They have a lot of versatility on the back end now.
No, they do. Like, it's a good unit. I think maybe it's not, obviously Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, that's the star power and the name recognition power of that defense. Both those guys are superstars. But outside of that, there's a lot of guys that don't necessarily have the name recognition, but are actually good, solid players. And that's most of that defense, really. So, yeah, I think that defensive group is going to be good again. And because that offense is so dominant, so formidable, like, it doesn't need to be amazing.
With Steve Wilkes moving on, fired this offseason as defensive coordinator, Nick Sorensen taking over. So, somewhat new system here. We'll see what that looks like. But again, on paper, it looked like the Niners are saying, we're not playing as much zone. We're going to play more man. We're going to get after it, be aggressive in the secondary. I'm looking forward to seeing what that looks like. Best case scenarios. Go ahead.
They've had a lot of turnover from the defensive coaching point of view over the last few years. I mean, obviously, a lot of it is because of good things, right? Robert Saleh hired away to be a head coach. DeMeco Ryans hired away to be a head coach. Steve Wilkes. And so it's like the fourth guy that's been at the helm of that defense in basically 4 years. That is a lot of kind of chopping and changing, even though every one of them has had a lot of success along the way.
I was about to say, I mean, the best case scenario seems pretty clear. They win a Super Bowl. You know, last year they were plays away. They lost in overtime, literally plays away, both, in regulation and in overtime from winning. They could put it all together. And, part of that is Shanahan getting over some of those. I don't know if it's fair or not, but the big game hump, right? Whether it's with Atlanta as an offensive coordinator or 2 Super Bowls with the Niners, just getting over the hump. But every time Shanahan has had a healthy quarterback, they've been in the NFC Championship or better since he's been in San Francisco.
Yeah, they're definitely a team where Super Bowl is easily within the range of positive outcomes. That's their best case, is they finally get one. Worst case scenario, I've seen people suggesting that the 49ers could miss the playoffs. I feel like their worst case scenario, again, outside of like catastrophic injury to critical player, right? Brock Purdy breaks his leg week 1. Outside of something like that, I feel like even the worst case 49er season probably has them sneaking into the postseason and being a wild card team.
Yeah, I think they're too good to have, again, injury aside. For them to have that disaster, it would take Brock Purdy playing like Mr. Irrelevant, right? I mean, I feel like we all do this as fans or as analysts where you say, well, this is what I thought the guy was. That was 3 years ago. And you, in the back of your mind, you're like, well, what if he goes back to where he was 3 years ago? And it usually doesn't happen. Usually a guy doesn't have 2 great seasons and then all of a sudden looks like a 7th round pick again. It would almost take something like that. Or, Ayuk is gone and, everything else just kind of falls apart. But yeah, I just think they're too good. They are too good. And, worst case scenario is just probably more angst in the playoffs, right? More, what about this play? What about that play? Missed opportunities, dropped interception here or there, missed throw here or there. The same stuff I think that has, haunted Kyle through the years.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, so I think their worst case scenario for 2024 still involves the playoffs. I think they're that good. Yeah. Their true worst case scenario, I guess, is that Brock Purdy does have a weird season that only adds to the confusion of how much of it is him versus everything else. And now you are staring down the barrel of the contract negotiation this is the only problem with that whole idea of the credit pie chart, right? How much goes to the quarterback, the receivers, the offensive line, the coach. It doesn't matter as long as they're all together on the same roster, right? Who cares? As long as they're all there, the whole of the pie stays the same. The only time it matters is when you now need to assign a dollar figure to it. Like when Brock Purdy comes along and says, okay, my contract is up. I now want $60 million a year. That's fine if Brock Purdy is taking up a huge amount of that credit pie and he's the guy driving the bus. If it turns out that Brock Purdy is actually a passenger and everybody else is a way bigger piece of that credit, well, now that becomes a problem. So anything that muddies that picture, I think, is a worst case scenario for the 49ers long term.
You're right, because when you're in it, everybody's like, who cares? They're producing. Who cares? They're producing. Well, at some point you have to care because you're trying to put a value on the player.
Right.
At some point it does matter. I don't know why I feel like I'm leaning toward Brock being the dude, right? Being that guy. I don't know if he's going to be the quote elite quarterback or whatever it might be, but I know early in a lot of careers, whether it was Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, Russell Wilson, there are other quarterbacks who won a lot early, and people tried to take credit away from them, right? Well, the defense did this, or there was this coach, or it was this supporting cast, and I think all those guys proved over time like they were the guy, right? Russ had an outstanding run despite what's happening right now. Roethlisberger, Hall of Fame career. Is Brock Purdy just another one of those guys where he was a big piece of it the whole way, not the whole piece, a big piece of it, and he'll continue. So that'll be definitely a story to watch. And what you said is if he has a Tua-like season where it's like kind of front runner-ish, and once you need to get over the hump, it feels like he's not bringing you there, it will make for some off-season questions when you're thinking about putting $60 million in front of his next salary. So did you have a key position group to highlight? I was talking defensive line. Did you have anything else you wanted to add on that?
It's still the offensive line to me. Like, I keep doing this, and yet eventually I'm going to have to accept that it just doesn't matter what the shape of your offensive line is in a Shanahan offense, right? Whether all three of those systems right now, Houston, Miami, and San Francisco, is any single one of those offensive lines even average? Like, every single one of them on paper, I think, is below average or worse. And it doesn't matter. They had the three best offenses in the NFL in terms of yards per attempt last season. They're all their quarterbacks look good. The offenses were good. Like, it just doesn't seem to make a difference, right? So, I keep looking at this and like, okay, Trent Williams is amazing at left tackle. And basically, they took him out of the lineup for a preseason game. And it's like, this offensive line is garbage. I just feel eventually that's got to cause problems, right? And it hasn't for a lot of games. But are we overdue, or is this just the dynamic?
It's the other thing that's made Kyle Shanahan so special, and in all the iterations of his offense, is we've seen it with quarterbacks. Oh, this guy elevates quarterbacks, or you made Jimmy Garoppolo one of the better statistical quarterbacks of all time in the few years he was in your system. But oh, by the way, you could do that with an offensive line too. Like, there's not a history of good offenses overcoming poor pass blocking. And this is using the baseline of like PFF grades do a really good job of describing what's happening on the field. And that's what's happened, right? They've given up a lot of pressure other than Trent Williams over the last few years. They've given up a lot of quick losses, but that's where scheming and the way they create angles and space in the offense, that's where, again, I think Kyle just deserves so much credit for overcoming that. So you could go make that mistake again this year and question them, but I'm just like, hey, as long as Trent's healthy, they'll sort it out.